Good morning. I'm going to try to be consistent with the other speakers. I am an enthusiastic and grateful member of the Worldwide Fellowship of the Al-Anon Family Groups, which includes Alateen. I am a member of this Thursday night Serenity Seekers Al-Anon group. My recovery date is October 21st, 2001. My name is Chere. Good thing I printed that all out. I'd also like to say that I am the spouse of the souse. That's for you. There we go. I have such a tremendous amount of gratitude to be an honor to be here to share the Al-Anon message. I want to have a special thanks to the committee. My husband and I have been a part of a lot of conventions with Alcoholics Anonymous, and you guys do it big time down here, that's for sure. Big time. I'm from Puyallup. It's Puyallup, Washington. And our conventions start on a Friday night. It's all day Saturday. We meander out sometimes Sunday morning. And, when this started Wednesday night, I'm like, I know alcoholics do it a lot, but man, more is better down here. It's a tremendous schedule. And, Thursday night after Rich shared, which was phenomenal, one of my new Al-Anon friends says, wow, that's a tough act to follow, Chere. I hope you can do it. So the Al-Anon love has been given to me and all of that. It's been good. I want to share with you that I love an alcoholic. I am madly, insanely in love with an alcoholic that in August 2001 is in the critical care unit, and he is dying from the disease. He's in his early 30s, and he has acute pancreatitis and his liver's going. And the doctor comes up to me and says, if you don't get him to stop drinking, he's going to be dead before the end of the year. Now, I don't think anybody has ever come up to me and said, you need to get him to stop drinking. I thought that. I've had that conversation with myself a multitude of times. I need to get him to stop drinking. If he doesn't stop drinking, I'm not going to have that happily ever after. And when did that happily ever after really started? I'm going to share with you that my husband, sometimes I like to tell him he's my current husband just to keep him on his toes, but but then we've had those conversations like, will you ever marry? Will you marry again when I die? And I'm like, nope, not going to do that again. But when I met him, he swept me off my feet. Now, we had known each other when we were kids. We did 4-H together. We grew up in a very rural part of Washington, and we grew up on little farms with our families. And he was that bad boy that was running around the barns at the county fair. And I'd like to say he's tall, dark, and handsome, but this is the truth. He's not tall. I'm tall. Let's just put it that way. The dark about him was he was always wearing black, and he still does today. And boy, was he cute, right? That twinkle in his eyes, and he was up to no good, and he got my attention right away. So I fell for him when I was young. I kissed him on the day I got my braces off at 14 years of age. Didn't know I was going to marry him later on, but I kissed him that day. And then when I told my dad, I was so excited about not having braces, and then I told him I kissed Matt Fields. He was not thrilled at all that day. But, we got reacquainted. We both married our high school sweethearts. He had 2 little girls. I had a son and a daughter. And we got reacquainted after our divorces. And so when we first started dating, our children were 6, 7, 8, and 9. And they had their perfect little pecking order, and it looked good. It looked good. And he was good. He was so different than my last husband. My first marriage it ended in abuse, a lot of emotional, mental, verbal, physical abuse. And the only way it was going to end was because of the police and the court systems. And that's how that marriage ended. And so now I'm with this guy, and I'm reintroduced to him, and he is sweeping me off my feet. He is taking me on dates. My first sponsor said he courted you. It's an old-fashioned word, but that's what he really did. He had flowers delivered to the bank I was working at all the time. The girls at the bank hated me after a while. They're just like, when's this ever going to stop? He took me on trips. We were together 1 year, and he took me to Europe on a 2-week vacation. He called it a work trip. I called it a vacation. And we were in the city of Prague in the Czech Republic, and he gave me a ring, and he says, I want you to be my wife. Now, I want to be his wife. He's my Prince Charming. He's so different. He listens, and he's caring, and he doesn't yell at me, and he doesn't throw things at me, and he doesn't hit me. He drinks a lot, but I can ignore that, right? I don't have to pay attention to that. Because it wasn't a problem in my mind, because he wasn't doing all the other things that I think are problems in the relationship. So we have been together for a while. We proposed. I like to share how we moved in, because this sort of gives the scenario of our relationship. We'd been together for several months, and one weekend we had this great weekend with all 4 kids, and I mentioned to him, I just sort of threw this idea out there, what do you think about living together? And living together means he has to move in, because I live on the family farm. I have a grandma that lives next door, so I can't move out. I got to take care of the grandma. And he just sort of grunted, like, right? And I let it go. That's the extent of our conversation and discussion about moving in, and that was on the weekend. Monday, I come home from work, and he's in the driveway, and he's got a coffee table, a lamp, and the dog in his car. And I'm like, okay, I guess we're moving in. Like, we didn't talk details, right? I would put an idea out there and see if it stuck. And that's what happened in our relationship. I put it out there. But alcoholism is a progressive disease, right? And his disease progressed, and so did mine. And so what happens is we find ourselves at that hospital, and he's in the critical care unit, and death is his outcome, and he doesn't care. In fact, that's a solution for him. That's a good idea for him. He's tired, he's done, he doesn't know how to not do drinking. And so drinking himself to death was his solution. It wasn't mine. But this is where step 1 comes in, where I really understand it, when it says that we're powerless over alcohol. And I got that. I knew that there was nothing that I was able to say or do that was going to change that. And that our lives had become unmanageable. And this was a sketchy one for me, because I'd been managing for a really long time. Managing our kids, managing our finances, trying to manage him, right? More of it is try to keep him out of places he's not supposed to go to when he's in a blackout. But I'd done a lot of managing. But I recognized that I was done. I knew that there was nothing more that I could do. And, we talk about the insanity of the disease in step 2, that I could be restored to sanity. And I was thinking, well, what does insanity look like in the disease, in the family disease? And I'm going to give you some examples. This might have happened to you, but this is what happened in our home. I did a lot of talking at him. Asking him those pointed questions, when are you going to stop? Do you feel like stopping? How much have you had to drink? Don't you think you've had enough? That's a great question. Don't you think you've had enough? His answer's never. We would go out to drink, or we'd go out somewhere. It's always involved drinking, and I'd have maybe a glass of wine, and I maybe might finish it, and it would boggle his brain. You are wasting good alcohol, he would tell me. How do you not finish that? Right? And I'm sitting there, I'm like, how do you not stop? Right? Total different spectrums of this family disease. I did some yelling. He would say I probably did a lot of yelling. I remember a time where I literally was on my knees. He had been at this point drinking 24/7. And often he would pick up his girls on the way home from work, and he was coming home drunk with the girls in the back seat. And I remember there was a day where I was on my knees in front of him, and I said, if you love me, you'll stop drinking. And I know that my husband loves me, but I also know he can't stop drinking to do the drink. I even said, if you love your girls, you'll stop drinking. And I know my husband treasures his daughters, but he was powerless and he could not stop drinking. And I remember begging him to just please stop. I have done the silent treatment. Those were his favorite moments in life. And then I would get angry that he wasn't bothered by my silent treatment. I tried everything. You know, with 4 kids living on a farm and a grandma and all of the livestock that we had, organization is really important, and I am an Excel spreadsheet kind of girl. And I thought, I'm going to try this out with his drinking, and I created I thought it might work, I'm just saying. So I came to him on a Thursday night, and I said, what do you think about just drinking on the weekends? Weekends only. And he said, sure, because he would agree to anything just to get me to shut up. Sure. So I created the Excel spreadsheet drinking chart, right? It went on the refrigerator next to the chore chart that the kids had, okay? And so he drinks on Friday night, and that's okay, right? Because it's on the chart. And he drinks Saturday night, and it's okay because it's on the chart. And Sunday night's okay too, fine, it's on the chart. He can drink on Sunday night. But Monday comes around, and he's drinking, and that is not okay. It is not on the chart. And I think only an insane person who thinks they can control alcoholism will create a chart and think they can control drinking. And I, honest to God, thought it might work. And that's how insane I was trying to manage and control the disease in our house. It continued to get worse. And around this time, 9/11 happened. And I worked in a financial institution where every morning before 7 a.m. I made a phone call to New York, and I placed our directions for the day on Wall Street. And that morning of 9/11, I was not able to make that phone call. And after that, I was never able to speak to that person that I did every morning. I don't know what happened to that person, but I know what happened that day. And in the midst of my darkness, of my despair, of my brokenness, of having a husband that was dying from this disease, there are thousands of people that have it worse. There are thousands of people that have lost their loved ones. And I was just had this mixed feeling of guilt and shame and horror about what was going on with our country. And I couldn't talk to him because he was drunk 24/7. In fact, if you ask him, he pretty much has no memory of 9/11. He was not present in the moment. And I had to continue on with 4 kids, a job, a grandma, and my head, my life. And there was a moment where I'm coming home from work, and I don't know if you remember that time, but churches started opening up just for prayer. And there was a church, never been there since, but there was a morning or an afternoon I drove by it. I got released from work because there was nothing to do that day. And on my way home, I saw the billboard, and it says, the doors are open. And I walked into that church, and nobody was there. I heard some women in the kitchen sort of talking and chattering and stuff, and I sat in the back pew of the church, and I just fell apart. And I was just crying out to God that I don't know what to do, and I need your help. And I don't know how long I sat in that church, but there was this quietness and this calmness. And I had this vision that it wasn't going to be me. I had this picture in my mind that it wasn't going to be me that was going to save my husband. Literally, there was this hand. Think of Michelangelo or something, I don't know. But there's this hand that came down, and it was waiting for my husband's hand to reach back to that hand. Now, maybe that's the hand of God. I don't know. Maybe it's the hand of AA. I don't know. But I know it wasn't my hand that was going to help my husband get better. And shortly after that, my husband got conned into going into treatment. We call it an intervention. He thinks we tricked him. And he did do those 28 days of treatment. It gave him a moment to sober up and get a little bit of clarity. He was voted most likely to drink again while he was there. On the last day, I went to family education, like I haven't already been educated, but this is what I learned. The solution was to go to Al-Anon. That wasn't an answer for me. I had to bring him home against my will, but I had to bring him home, and how do I keep him from drinking? He's going to drink again. He's going to die. What do I do? And their answer to everything was go to Al-Anon. And that's exactly what happened. Within 12 hours of coming home, my husband is drunk. And 3 days later, I'm in the first meeting of the Al-Anon family groups. In that first meeting, I did a lot of didn'ts. We have the do's and don'ts, but I did a lot of didn'ts. I didn't introduce myself as a newcomer, so nobody knew why I was there. I did not get any literature. I did not get any phone numbers. I did not get a welcome packet that we're so good about giving out in Al-Anon. But I did come home with the meeting schedule. And back then in our area, the meeting schedule, the first half of the little booklet, call it the where and when, was all AA meetings, and the back half of the booklet was the Al-Anon meetings. And that was my schedule, was this where and when. And within a couple of days, I remember asking my husband, we had this phone conversation, and his memory and my memory are completely very skewed. I'm right, just saying. And he called me, I'm at work, and I don't know why he called me, but he's drunk. And he called me, and I said to him, aren't you supposed to be going to those AA meetings? And he goes, what are you talking about? And I'm thinking, you just spent 28 days. I spent 1, and I know you're supposed to go to AA. How did that happen? And he goes, well, if you want me to go to a meeting, find me a meeting. Well, guess what? I had to where and when. And here's another thing. Guess what? It's about a mile down the road. Now, we live in the country. Nothing is a mile down the road, right? Except the shop group. That's it. The shop group is down there. It's in an hour. There's your first meeting. He has his own story about that first meeting, but I will tell you that my husband was introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, the right way. He was given his sponsor. He was 12-stepped into the program. And he met his sponsor on October 30th of 2001. And he has had continuous sobriety since that date. And I will say that is because of Alcoholics Anonymous. That is because of his sponsor, Tom, who will forever have a special place in my heart. And that is the moment when recovery really, truly started in our home, was because of this program and because of his sponsor. I sort of utilized his sponsor a lot in the beginning. But I was going to one meeting a week. I was going to a Saturday morning meeting. It was all I could do. 4 kids working full time. I can only go to that Saturday morning meeting a week. And I'd walk in late, and I'd grab the chair that had the Kleenex box, and I would sit there for 90 minutes, and I would cry the whole entire time. You know, Elle shared yesterday about having a safe place, making sure that our meetings are a safe place. And for me, those 90 minutes once a week was my safe place to fall apart. I did not have to keep it together. I could just be and just listen. My first service position was the Kleenex box holder. That was me. Every week. I would share it with you occasionally. But for me, one meeting a week is not enough in recovery. One meeting a week means I'm barely getting recovery. And I bought a book, and I don't even remember which book I bought, but I didn't read it. You know, so my disease progresses. And what was astonishing to my husband and I is we really believe that if you just remove the alcohol, if you just stop drinking, everything will be fine. And that's exactly what happened. He stopped drinking, and then it sucked. It was horrible. We like to share that my husband stopped drinking, and then he found his opinion. And he liked to share it. And I didn't want to hear it. So it's game on in our house. Like, it's a whole new level of chaos. And I just kept getting sicker because I didn't have any tools. My solution was he needed to be better and he needed to change. During this time, we ended up going into foster care because, more is better. And our first two little kids came to us when they were 2 and 3, and they never left. And so we ended up adopting our two youngest, and they're 21 and 22 today. You guys clap as if they're lucky they survived me. I'm just saying. Right? I think they are lucky they survived me. But they like to tell everybody that, well, this is what we say, that he's got 2, I got 2, we bought 2. They like to tease their older siblings and say, Mom and Dad chose us. So they poked the barrel. But I just got busy. Man, I just got focused on them, whoever they were. My job, the kids, more foster kids. I ignored him as much as I could unless he was in my face. And I didn't do well, right? I had no solution. I had absolutely no spiritual solution. And around this time, a couple of years of sobriety is going on, and my husband's sponsor suggests that maybe we do more together. And I don't think he got the memo that we don't like each other. But now we're going to do more together. And he suggested we start doing morning devotions. He suggested we start going to concurrent meetings and things like that, and that's what we do. We follow sponsor's suggestion, and we started having morning devotions either out of the Al-Anon book, Courage to Change, or out of the 24-hour book. We started going to concurrent meetings. Friday night became our date night. We go to the Buckley group, and AA is downstairs, Al-Anon's upstairs. We'd fight the whole way to the meeting. I'd go upstairs, he'd go downstairs, we'd do our meeting, we'd come out, he goes, how was your meeting? And I would say, it's anonymous. What's said at the meeting stays at the meeting, right? I'm such a brat. And but this is what happened in that meeting. I identified. For the first time, I don't know why, my ears are open or my heart is willing. I don't know what's happening, but I'm identifying with what's being said. And there's a woman in this meeting, Patty H., and she's no longer here with us, but I remember her sharing this story that she's home and she's so worried because her husband's out there drinking and he's got to drive home. And is he going to get home safe? And she is just anxious and worried and fearful, and I identify with that. I know what that feels like to be so afraid of what's going to happen, that what if, and it controls everything in my mind. And then you see the headlights coming down the driveway, and there's that relief, and thank you, God. He came home one more time. And I remember that feeling, going, oh my gosh, he pulled in the driveway one more time. Thank you. He's safe. Now what? But I remember that feeling of relief. And then she said she would run and hop into bed and pull the covers up, and then she'd start planning his murder. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only wife that wants to kill him. That principle of identification, I think, is the magic that happens in both of our fellowships, where one person affected by this disease talks to another person affected by this disease, and there's understanding, and there's awareness, and there's compassion. And that's what happened to me. So I was encouraged to get my sponsor. This is how I was encouraged. It was never shared about in a meeting. It was my husband. My husband comes to me at some point, we've been doing this for a while, and he says, is Al-Anon a real thing? Like, is it a real program? And I'm like, yeah, it's real. I go there. I think it's real. And he says, well, do you guys have steps? And I go, yeah, they're the same as yours. We have the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. The only difference is step 12. We can't work with an alcoholic. You guys suck. We're going to work with others. Right? And so he's poking me. He's just like, just kept saying things and poking me. And I, of course, am responding appropriately. And then he says, it's not life or death like it is for us, right? This isn't a life or death disease. You're not saving anybody. And I go, well, you're still alive. So I did find my sponsor. We ended up in Tacoma in October. Tacoma has a sponsorship conference every year that Alcoholics Anonymous puts on. And I figured that's where the sponsors must hang out. They were at the convention once a year. So I went there, and there was a woman that I sat next to that's in my Friday night home group. And she asked me why I was there, and I told her, I'm in search of a sponsor. And she said, I can help you. And so that night, that Friday night at the convention, she gave me my first assignment. And my first assignment was to read the first 164 pages of the big book. Okay. Now, I've read the big book. Well, I read one section of the big book. Earlier, when my husband was newly sober, he handed me his big book and said, you should read this chapter to wives. I wasn't in the right mind to read the chapter to wives. I'm just saying. I didn't like it. I didn't like him. I threw the book at him. I will say this, though. If you guys pay attention to our opening, there is a lot in the Al-Anon opening that comes from the chapter to wives. So I'm grateful for that chapter. But I got that sponsor. She had me read those first 164 pages. I met with her at her house every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, and we got busy. And we went through those steps. She had me, what was really interesting is she had me focus on the care of God in step 3. Not so much what does it look like to turn my will and life over, but what does the care of God really look like? And in that exercise, what came out was this memory that I had when I was in the midst of my divorce, and my husband had pretty much wiped out all of our finances and then some. And I had zero money. You know, by the time I paid the mortgage and daycare, I had about, I don't know, maybe $70 a month to last me for the rest of the month. And there was a night I was coming home from work. I had to pick up the 2 kids from daycare, and I had zero food at home. None. And I was thinking, how am I going to feed them? How am I going to feed my 2 little babies? I have nothing. So during the day, during school days, they would go to school and get breakfast and lunch free. But for dinner, what do we do? And I just remember just crying in the dark as we're driving home, going, well, how am I going to feed the kids? What am I going to feed the kids? Maybe I can go next door and ask Grandma if I can borrow some food, right? But that shame and that guilt was just gripping me. And we walk in to our house. Now, we live in the country. We don't lock doors. We leave the keys in the trucks, okay? Just saying. And I walk in the door of our farmhouse, and there's about 30 bags of groceries on the counters. And it's a lot of counters, and there's a lot of groceries. And I don't know where it came from, but there was a note, and it came from my grandparents that I didn't even know that they knew what was going on, because I wasn't telling anybody. And they left all of this food. And the interesting thing is, those are my original alcoholics in my family that I'm aware of, right? They're the party grandparents. And they had never done anything for me before that day. They've never done anything for me since that day. But that day, the care of God showed up, using my grandma and my grandpa. And we had Lipton tea for 2 years. Just tons of food. But that exercise was really helpful, because for me, when I'm thinking that there's nothing that's going to change, when I'm in that dark place in despair, when I'm irritable, restless, and discontent, I have to be reminded, what does the care of God look like? Because some days I don't believe God's going to show up. There are days I don't believe it's going to happen, that there is going to be a solution. And then I have to go, yep, it's happened. Remember when. I will share that my most favorite inventory was the 4-step inventory, or my favorite step is the inventory step, the 4-step. And my sponsor lined out the columns like it's lined out in the big book, and it was thorough, very thorough. And I shared it with her, and I had zero fear about it, because I knew that I was part of the problem in our home and in our relationships, and I knew that I didn't want this anymore, and I wanted to figure out what was wrong with me, and it was, guess what? Fear. My life is run by fear. And I don't come across that way. Like, I'm almost 6 feet tall. I do not come across as a timid, fearful person. What I come across is I'm going to run you over, and I'm going to direct you on how you should do your life. Right? That managing, manipulating, controlling, rescuing, problem solving, that's what I do. But why? It's because I'm afraid. I'm afraid you're going to die. I'm afraid something bad's going to happen. I'm afraid you're not going to finish it. I'm afraid you are going to finish it. I'm afraid. And I was bowled over by that. I did not know that anxiety and fear ruled my life. But guess what? There's a solution. I don't have to let it. It doesn't have to stay that way. During this time, things are getting better. And my husband and I are sort of kind of getting along in recovery. Go figure. And we were introduced to a workshop outline that was given by a couple in Alcoholics Anonymous. You might know them, Dave and Polly, maybe. And we met with them. They were living in Washington at that time. Now they're here in Florida. But they invited us to their home out of the blue. And we sat down with them, and they used to present this workshop for traditions and relationships. And it's how to basically go through the 12 traditions and you inventory yourself. How well am I doing the principle in this tradition? Now, we decided to do this. We took this home, and because we know we can't do recovery alone, we invited other couples in recovery. And what was encouraged to us is that couples in recovery be in a committed relationship. They have at least done a 5th step with their sponsor. And that was important because when we go through these traditions, I'm inventorying myself. So I don't even know, if I don't know how to do that in the beginning, I'm not going to be able to do that in a tradition, let alone if I haven't done it in a step. So we started doing that. The first tradition talks about unity, and we were encouraged to make a list of everything we're in unity about, right? And then have a column of what we're in disunity about. And you work on it individually, and then you come together. And so this is what we do. We came together, and I had one thing in the unity column, and everything else was in the disunity column. And he had one kid, I think is what he had in the unity column. And you don't just say, work. You talk about the hours, the job. We didn't say, the kids. It was kid number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? It's everything. Money. Is our budget right? Do we need to change income levels? Sex. How often? Never, right? Like all of this stuff. Different sides of the spectrum of this disease. And it looked horrible in the beginning. How are we ever going to stay together? There's no unity in this relationship. I barely like him. I don't talk to him about anything personal. He's not my safe person. How are we going to find unity? And, he shared this in a workshop one time because we do this often. And he said, it's okay that there's nothing in that unity or it's not as good as we hope it to be. Because, it's just like when we come here to our programs. We don't come here well. We come here to get better. So it's all right that we're not in unity because our goal is to get better, right? And thank goodness there's a tradition too, where there's a different ultimate authority and her name is not Chere, right? And that we can do whatever we need to do when there's a decision to be made. It's not his decision, it's not my decision, it's a we decision, and we invite God into that event. And it's simple. Whether we buy a car, not buy a car, change jobs, build a house, give money to a kid, whatever it may be, we always pray about it. We do something that another member of Al-Anon, Mary Pearl, she does traditions as well, and she uses the phrase, bless it or block it. And so we ask God, it's really simple. It's a fragment prayer that says, will you bless it or block it? And it becomes very obvious when something is blocked. Like, nope, don't go there, door shut, let's go right or left. And that's what we do. We invite, and it takes that responsibility off, right? The ownership off because of the we, when we invite God into that decision making. Tradition 4 is about autonomy, which has been probably one of my biggest struggles because I like to manage people's lives. It works for me. They don't like it, but I'm okay with it. And tradition 4 says no, you don't get to. They're autonomous. They get to make their own decisions, and then they get to live with those decisions, whether you like it or not. That's okay. Tradition 6 says I need to really look at whether I want to endorse, finance, or lend my name. And with 6 adult children, trust me, there have been many times where somebody has come to us and say, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, will you, whatever it may be. And they know us by now, so that when they do come to us, they'll say, hey, when you guys pray about this and then let me know what you think? That's how they come to us today. Because they know we're not going to make a decision on our own. We're going to bring God into it. And we might participate in whatever their next venture is. Tradition 10 is my favorite. It says that I have no opinion on outside issues. And I have a lot of opinions. And this is what I learned. When I have a loved one that is doing something or saying something or whatever, and I have an opinion about it, it doesn't help them. I have given the message off to my children, especially to my children, that they're not able, they're not capable, they're not qualified, they're not good enough, they're not smart enough, because I'll do it for you. So when my kids today are telling me about their next adventure or their next solution, I do a lot of humming. Okay, that's it. They have picked up on it now. They're like, Mom, why are you humming? My husband says, you're humming, which means I'm really thinking something. I'm just not prepared to say it. Step 6 and 7. Okay, so there's not a lot of description about step 6 in the big book. Like, how am I supposed to do this? And I want really detailed, definition, like how to do this. So I Googled it. I Googled step 6, character defects. There are 47 pages on Google for character defects. But I wanted to be thorough. That list. I didn't want to be that person anymore. I did not. There was nothing in me, and still to this day, there is nothing in me that wants to be who I used to be. And I'm so grateful that the steps brought me to this point that I have this opportunity to ask the God of my understanding, help me. Humbly go before him and say, I don't want this anymore. Will you help me? Around this time, or shortly after this time, things were changing, right? Obviously, our relationship is getting so much better. We're able to have these conversations where he would say, hey, Chere, I was thinking about da-da-da-da-da. And instead of saying, like the old me would say, are you nuts? What are you thinking? I would just go, well, I'm not quite in unity about that. And it wasn't to degrade him. It wasn't to tell him he was, not smart enough or that I was better than him. It really was a different language. The traditions gave us a different language on how to communicate with each other. So I was able to say that in a kinder, more gentler way. But we're getting better. And around this time, my husband's oldest daughter got kicked out of her home with her mom. And she's a senior in high school, going to start her senior year, and she's going to come live with us full time. Now, I'm a little leery around this, because there was a situation that happened when she was 13 years old, and during that time, I'm not good when she's 13 years old. I'm still in my ick in our home of alcoholism, and she's 13, and she's living with us, and she is running the roost, like just bowling over everybody. She is queen bee, and creating a lot of chaos and getting in trouble. And the way it looked in our home, she'd get in trouble, her dad would line out the punishment, then he would go to work, and then I'm the enforcer, right? So it made me look like the bad guy all the time. And my behavior made me the bad guy most of the time. I mean, I definitely earned that. And there was a situation that happened between her mom, and my husband, and it was all behind my back, and I lost my mind. And I told my husband, either she goes or I go. Because I couldn't handle the disruption in our home. If there's something that I can't control, I don't want it there anymore. And he did not agree to that right away. He went and talked to a sponsor. He talked to another trusted friend of his. And he made a decision that his daughter was going to move back home, knowing that mom's home is not great. And he made that decision. And, I said that as a reaction, right? I want to control this. And so I reacted and I made that statement. But days later, as I'm packing up her room, I'm crying and I'm feeling horrible. And I called him at work and I said, are you sure? Like, we can just let her stay. Let's work this out. And once my husband's mind is made up, it's made up. He's like, no, she's going. I'm done. And I felt horrible. And today, especially with that inventory, what my sponsor helped me see is that this is a little 13-year-old girl that's been affected by this disease from the moment she was born, that is acting like a 13-year-old should, who's been affected by this disease, right? She's acting exactly the way she should. And what a horrible message I participated in, that you're not good enough, you don't get to live here, you're not worth it, right? That was the message that we gave her when she was 13 years old. And that did not help our relationship during that time at all. So now she's a senior, she's 17. And she's coming back to us, but things are different. And this is what's different. I got a sponsor, right? This is different. I have a sponsor, so I'm not alone in how to handle a 17-year-old. Him and I are different. We have this foundations with the traditions and this communication language that we can use, that we can be unified when we're dealing with her. And that was a really, really scary time, like just for her to move in. And then it tended to get a little worse. She'd been with us for a couple of months. We laid down some ground rules, right? This is a kid that doesn't want to go to school, doesn't want to show up to work, wants to party all the time. And we're saying, no, blow up, right? We're saying there's a curfew, blow up, right? She's just acting out. And we're staying in place. We're shoulder to shoulder as much as we can by our height difference. And we're unified. And we said, we love you, but no, right? And I think what happened is that we showed her that we're a safe place. And she started to fall apart. She didn't have to hold it all together. And she started to fall apart. And we got a phone call one day from the school counselor, and she had a plan to kill herself. And my husband calls me, and he says, this is what's going on. I'm on my way down to the school. And he goes, can you help, right? And I said, yeah. And I knew that I couldn't do it. I knew that Al-Anon's taught me that I can reach out to professionals. And I called that 1-800-SUICIDE helpline number that's out there. And that day we had her with a counselor. That day. And it started a journey where our daughter wanted to not live anymore. And one more time, I am back in the place of powerlessness of somebody wants to die and I can't keep them alive no matter what I say or do. And my sponsor encouraged me to go to more meetings, to share my fear and anxiety in those meetings. So I upped my game. Instead of 3 meetings a week, I'm going 5 meetings a week. And every day was just one day at a time. Is today the day? Right? There was a moment where my husband travels a lot for work and he's out of town, and he calls me one night. And our daughter was supposed to be at school. She went to college courses in the evening, and she was supposed to be in class, but he called me and he said she's in a really bad place. She's going to drive her car into a tree. Will you call her? And I don't think twice. I'm married to a delegator. And so he's like, do this. And I'm like, okay. And so I call her. And I just, she's bawling. She's crying on the phone. She doesn't want to talk. And so I talk. I'm really good at it. So I just talk. And I tell her about my day. I tell her that I took the kids to the dentist and what they got out of the treasure box at the dentist. And I am talking nonsense, right? But I am just talking. And she's driving home. And eventually she says, she goes, Chere, I'm at the gate. And I said, okay, kid. She said, come on in, dinner's ready. And she came in the driveway, and I called my husband back right away, and I said, she's home. And he just fell apart, just sobbing on the phone. And I was shocked, because during this whole entire time, I had not seen the reaction of fear and anxiety from him. Concern, definite concern. But I didn't know he was as afraid as I was afraid that he was going to lose his little girl. And we went through a journey with her, continuing getting her help, mental health help, and doing the deal. But during that time, shortly after that, I was leaving my sponsor's house, God shot, and my husband calls me that day, that Wednesday, and he says, I'm going to drink. He's 7 years sober and drinking his solution that day. And I said, okay. And he goes, no, I'm going to go to the bar and I'm going to drink. And I said, okay. I said, can you do me a favor? What? I go, can you call Tom first and just let him know? You go, fine, I'll call Tom. Right? And I get off the phone and I just pray, and there's nothing I can do, right? Because I am powerless over alcoholism. And one more time, the miracle of AA happens, because that sponsor met with my husband, and whatever that conversation was, my husband did not have to drink that day. The magic of one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic. There was a time later on, years later, I was in Vancouver, British Columbia at Al-Anon International, and I don't know, nothing was going on, right? Life was good. It was good. And my husband called me that morning, or I called him, and I'm like, hey, how's life? And I know he's home with the kids, but, I mean, come on. And he goes, I'm really struggling. He goes, I'm really struggling. I want to drink today. And I'm like, really? Like, where'd this come from? And he goes, well, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I called my sponsor, and he told me to talk about it in the meeting this morning. His home group was on Saturday morning. And I'm like, did you? And he goes, yeah. And I go, what happened? He goes, they laughed at me. Now, if you knew my husband, he's about as sarcastic as they come. So I understand why they laughed at him. But Bruce didn't. Bruce heard my husband. Bruce got a hold of my husband that day, in fact, that whole entire weekend, and didn't let him go. They went bowling. They went and got pizza. But one more time, there's another alcoholic that grabs my husband and doesn't let him go and says there's a solution and you don't have to drink today. And forever I will be grateful. Those are my two favorite men in Alcoholics Anonymous, is Tom and Bruce. So I briefly want to talk about the amends, step 9 and the amends process, because that daughter that I kicked out, that daughter that I had a really tumultuous senior year with, is on my amends list number 1. Right? She's at the top of my amends list that I made with my sponsor. And I called her up, and our kids grew up in AA and Al-Anon, so they know the drill. And I said, hey, I'm working on my 9th step with my sponsor, and she's 19 at this time, and I just said, hey, can I meet with you and do my amends? And I told her, I said, you're first on my list. And I know she was thinking, damn straight I am, right? So I met with her. She was in school, and I met with her in her town, and we went to Starbucks, and I went over that list of how I affected this little girl and the things that I had done and how I was wrong, and gave her an opportunity to share anything that she wanted to share. And we're crying, both of us, and we're stealing napkins off all the other tables in Starbucks. And she said, I asked her, I said, where do you want this relationship to go? How can I make this right? And she said, just check on me every now and then. And I've done that from that moment on. She left a little crack open for me to step through. And I've done that ever since. She's 32 years old. She lives in Springdale, Arkansas. She's married. She's fabulous. And over the years, from 19 to 32, I have continued to check on her often. I send her housewarming gifts. I call her. I send her text messages. She calls me. She was marrying her second husband, and life is chaotic. Her mom is just blasting her up one side and the other because she doesn't approve of who my daughter is going to marry. And I'm in the Costco parking lot, and she's on the phone crying. She calls me. And she's like, Chere, why does my mom do this? Why does she say the things that she's saying? And I'm like, because she loves you, hon. She loves you. She doesn't want you to make a mistake. She doesn't know how to say it any nicer. She doesn't know how to be kind and compassionate. She doesn't have it. Remember when I was that way? Your mom loves you. And she's crying, and she says, Chere, you know what you are? You're my bonus mom. This program gave me a new title, right? I'm not the evil stepmom. I'm not the crazy dad's wife. Well, I am, but, but I'm the bonus mom, and so Mother's Day, I get these handwritten cards from her. I don't get the Starbucks cards or the store-bought cards. I get handmade written cards from her that she describes her love for me. That's the gift that I get today. I will say that I tried to do amends with my husband. He was, when I did my 9th step, I had it all written out. I came to him and I said, hey, I need to do my amends with you. Now, we've been getting along for years now. I'm a late bloomer when it comes to amends. And he says, no. Now, when he did his amends to me, I don't know how, he wasn't even a year sober, and I wouldn't let him do amends to me because I didn't believe him and I didn't want to hear it. So I said no to him often. He locked me into his truck and wouldn't let me out until he did his 9th step with me. So I thought for sure he would understand. He would be understanding. And and he said no. And he walked out the door. So I called my sponsor and I explained the situation. He won't let me do this and I've worked so hard. Here's my list. What do I do? And she got really quiet and she said, Chere, I'm going to have to call you back. I need to call my sponsor. That was a lesson to me. It's really good that your sponsor has a sponsor, just in case, you need that backup plan. But the amends, they're important. Even if they came late in life, right? Even if I'm this different person, it's so important because nothing changes if nothing changes. And we have a line in one of our books that says, knowledge without action is fantasy. So just because I know that I should be saying something to him or acknowledging where I was wrong and how I want to make it right, if I don't actually take that action and get in front of him and say, this is what it is, I believe nothing changes. But for me, doing those amends with my daughter and my husband changed the direction. That's what the word amend means, to change directions, change course. And that is what has happened in my relationship. I have a few minutes left and I want to share this. It's 10, 11, and 12. I've heard them described as maintenance steps. And to me, those are my growing steps. I don't want to maintain. I don't want to be stale. I want to continue to learn and grow and seek and get better. Because life is still in session. Life is still happening. And currently we have our youngest that we adopted. She walked out the door 3 years ago and we haven't seen her since. And she's doing life her way, right? And she's autonomous and she can be self-supporting. And I have no opinion on outside issues that I'm going to talk about. But I have really struggled with losing my baby girl. I have struggled in that fear, anger, and guilt since she walked out the door. So my continued inventory in step 10 has a lot to do with her because I don't want to feel that way anymore. I don't want to hang on to that anger. I don't want to hang on to the guilt. Where did I go wrong? Should I have done something else? Whatever it may be. And I was encouraged in a moment of chaos that she brought on when I called two women, trusted friends of mine that are in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I told them about what was happening with her. And they both told me, both of them, I swear they ganged up on me. They said, Chere, I'm so sorry. And you just need to breathe and pray. So for the first year of 2019 rolling into 2020, that was my lifeline, was just to breathe and to pray. And try to halt my mind from the chaos and the obsession of what was going on with her. My 11 has been to definitely improve that conscious contact with my higher power. And this is what my higher power has been doing to me this year. Aren't we all lucky? I keep getting this nudge that I need to write to my daughter. And I'm afraid to, right? I've been resistant of that most of this time, and I keep giving this nudge because I think about her every day, right? She's on my prayer list every day. And I'm like, I think about her. Is she thinking about me? What is she doing? Is she okay? Is she eating? She puts everything out there on social media, so if I wanted to, I could find out, but I don't want to. I just like to be right here in the moment, asking God to cover her and to protect her and to let her know that I'm thinking of her. And so I started this journal to my daughter this summer. It's new. I have no intention of ever sharing it with her. The 11th step is for me. That God empowers me to do whatever I'm supposed to do. And that's what I'm doing. I also have a help me list, sort of like a honey-do list, but it's for God, right? To help me, whatever it is for today. What is it today that I need help with? Step 12 is about carrying the message and practicing these principles in all our affairs. I will share this. In 2018, I'm going to go back. 2015, I had an opportunity to take my mom to Norway. There was a family we got introduced to. My great-grandmother immigrated from Norway prior to World War II. And they were having a family reunion. Somehow we found out about it. Thank you, Facebook. And my husband heard my mom talking about how wonderful would it be if we could go to Norway, right? She just put that wish out there. And my husband says, take your mom to Norway. So I got to do that that summer, and I found out and learned about my great-grandmother and where she grew up, the oldest of 11 kids. And then I heard about her mom and I actually went to that house and saw where she grew up. And this is what I found out. I come from a long, long line of women that love their families. That's who I am. I love my family. But I'm going to be honest, the whole trip was around one event, and that was my Al-Anon meeting, right? I planned the whole thing so I can go to the Monday night meeting in Oslo, the English-speaking meeting in Oslo. And my mom and I get in a taxi, $60 later. We get to this church in this beautiful old part of Oslo. There's like 14 doors, and we're walking around the church building. We can't find where the meeting is or which door is open. And wouldn't you know it, nobody comes. Nobody comes to do the Al-Anon meeting, and I'm sitting on the curb, slightly depressed, and my mom's sort of like stroking my back, you know how moms do. And this young man walks up to me, and he starts speaking to me in Norwegian, and I'm like, dude, American here. And he says to me, is Al-Anon here? And I said, I wish. You know, nobody came with the key. There's not a meeting today. And I said, are you new to Al-Anon? Are you looking? And he shared with me that his girlfriend just got sober in London. And the members of Alcoholics Anonymous in London told her to tell her boyfriend to go to Al-Anon, right? And so that's what he's doing. And I'm like, well, why are you going to an English-speaking meeting? And he goes, so I can learn how to talk to my girlfriend in London. And I said, that's nice, but go to your meetings. Like, go to meetings that you understand the language, right? And I was so disappointed. But I talked to him about Al-Anon, you know, about our 3 C's, that it didn't cause it, can't control it, can't cure the disease. You know, to get the literature, get phone numbers, all the things that we do with newcomers, right? I do that because that's just what I do. And then I get back in the taxi because I told the guy, if you come back and get us in 2 hours, I'll pay you really good, right? And so the taxi shows up, my mom and I get in, and we leave, and I'm so sad. I didn't get my international meeting. And somewhere in there, I think God just bopped me upside the head and said, Chere, you weren't supposed to be here to get a meeting. You were here to give a meeting. You know, and that's been my service theme. Is my job and my role is to give, is to serve. And where does God want me to serve next? In 2018, I found myself in Baltimore at the Al-Anon International. My service position at that time, I was the Northwest Regional Trustee on the Board of Trustees for World Service Office, and so I was working the International. But because of that, because I had this opportunity to serve the fellowship of Al-Anon worldwide, with a huge group of friends from Washington, we took a day and we went to Washington, D.C. Now, I've never been there, never thought I would be there. And there was a moment I'm sitting with my best friend in recovery, and we're on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, and I'm looking out at the water and the Washington Memorial at the end, and all I keep thinking is Forrest Gump, the movie. I took pictures of it and sent it to my kids, right? My one daughter is Janae, and we always like, Janae, I love you. We're a weird family. But I'm sitting on those steps, and it hit me. And I started crying, and my friend says, what's up? And I said, I can't believe I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here doing service for Al-Anon the way I get to, love on people, all because I love an alcoholic. How lucky am I? My favorite quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, it says, place yourself in the middle of the stream of power and wisdom, which flows into your life. Then, without effort, you are impelled to truth and to perfect contentment. I have found that when I place myself in the middle of the stream of Al-Anon, in the middle of Al-Anon, when my husband puts himself and has continued to put himself in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, we have this life that I've never could imagine, right? That life beyond belief. I love an alcoholic. I am deeply, all-consuming in love with him. He is my best friend today, a man with integrity and values that lives a life based on the principles you guys have taught him how to live, and how lucky am I. Al-Anon gave me the principles to live my life, a life so enriched with friends and fellowship and experiences and memories and tools that I can do. No matter what life's going to hand me today, I can do the day. Thank you guys so much.